Has anyone ever said to you that the reason that you got the job that you have or a graduate level position is because you are Black? Have you ever been in a situation where someone told you that you were not like those other Black people? Well, I'm drkerryann Williams. I'm a psychiatrist practicing in Massachusetts, and welcome back to Black Mental Health Matters. In today's show, I'm going to be speaking with Deb Jackson. She's a social worker that is a clinical development and training specialist, but she's also a life coach and has her own company called Deliberately Daring Coaching and Consultation. And today we're going to be talking about microaggressions and their effect on mental health. So if that's something that's of interest to you, then keep listening. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Black Mental Health Matters. I'm drkerryann Williams, and this is a show that's all about mental health in the Black community. And if you want to participate throughout the show today, you can give us a call at 617-238-7111. That's 617-238-7111. We're also streaming live on Facebook on heat981fm.com. So you can go to the page heat981fm.com for the Facebook live stream. Today with me in the studio as my co-host for today is Deb Jackson. She has her own, she's a life coach. She has her own business called Deliberately Daring Coaching and Consultation. And you're also in clinical development and training?
Clinical training and development specialist at JRI.
All right. So, guys, today we are talking about microaggressions. And so I want to just introduce the topic a little bit, and we're just going to just talk about some common microaggressions. And I'd be interested to hear from you guys out there. You know, what are some of your opinions about some of these things? So basically, a microaggression is a term that kind of gets thrown around a lot. And a lot of folks will just say, oh, you know, there's not really such a thing. People are just being oversensitive. No one's really trying to hurt anybody else. So just kind of let it all go. But a microaggression, I was kind of reading up on this. It's more than just an insult. It's not just an insensitive comment, and it's not just being a jerk. It's very specific. Basically, what makes them special is that it's targeting a person in light of their membership to a certain group. So, for example, if they're in a particular racial group and that racial group has been historically discriminated against, then that statement is particularly painful in relation to that person's position in that group. So it is something that happens casually, it happens frequently. And the interesting thing is that the person, you often making the comment, they don't really necessarily intend to harm the person. However, the statement has the effect of really being painful for that person because of maybe the history of how that racial group has been treated or so on. So what we wanted to talk about today were just some examples of microaggressions and just discuss why this is even relevant for our mental health. So, let me see where I want to kind of start here. One thing they said in what I was reading was that people who engage in microaggressions are ordinary folks who experience themselves as good, moral, decent individuals. And microaggressions occur because they're outside the level of conscious awareness of the perpetrator. And I think this is the other part of what makes microaggressions, it kind of causes a lot of offense on both sides, is that the person is offended, but then the person, when they're called out, the other person is also offended because they say, well, I didn't mean it. And it is something that tends to happen outside the level of their conscious awareness. It is tied to something called implicit bias. And implicit biases are just the attitudes and stereotypes and assumptions that we're not even aware of, but they can creep into our minds and affect our actions. So basically, it's the thoughts that you just didn't even know you had about certain people. And there are different tests that people can take. One is called the implicit association test, where, they can see if people have, for example, trouble connecting positive terms with the word Black on an implicit association test. And there are other different things they can look for to show whether or not you have a negative implicit bias. So I'll let, Deb kind of introduce herself again a little bit and share some of her beginning thoughts on microaggressions and some of the things that she found.
Okay, great. So again, Deb Jackson. I am the owner of Deliberately Daring Coaching and Consultation, as well as the Clinical Training and Development Specialist at JRI. I'm an LICSW. And so I was really excited to come and talk to you about microaggressions and the impacts that it has on mental health because of some of those very things that you just said, right? And so when we're thinking about microaggressions, a couple of things that we want to think about. There is absolutely this level that is happening where people are being aggressive and they don't know it, right? Because of all of those implicit biases that you just mentioned. But sometimes people know and they trying to be slick, right? They trying to throw them little things in there, and then when you get upset, they're like, what? I didn't mean. Mm-hmm. And so we absolutely want to determine the difference between intent and impact, right?
Yes.
Because if I step on your foot and you like, ow, I'm supposed to be like, I'm sorry.
Exactly.
Not just, I didn't mean to, right? Because you don't care that I didn't mean to. What you care about is that I stepped on your foot.
Right.
And what we don't think about is the amount of times when people are in marginalized communities and they're experiencing these microaggressions. It's happening all the time, right? So the first time you step on my foot, I'm going to just be like, ow. The 15th time you step on my foot, I'm going to be like, ow. And the 25th time you step on my foot, I'm about to fight you because why you keep stepping on my foot.
Exactly.
Right? And so we need to think about that when we're talking about microaggressions, is that it's the pervasiveness of it, and that there are different levels, right? And so there are micro invalidations, which is when someone says something that invalidates your reality, right? So those are those situations where it's like, well, all my experiences with the police, they've been very helpful. I don't understand why you have problems with them. But I'm telling you, and I'm showing you, and there's this documented history, but you're like, well, that's not my experience, so it can't be true. So that's a microaggression, right? We have micro insults, where it sounds like compliments, but really they're not, right? And so we all know this, like, you're so articulate. You're so articulate. Okay, I have a master's, you have a PhD. Like, what did they expect us to sound like? I really don't know what you were thinking, right? And then we have the really like micro assaults where they know that's like the purposeful, I am, doing these things. Like, I'm not going to give you this loan, even though clearly your credit says that you are valid for that. And so we want to really think about how it's operating in these different levels. And another thing that I think is really important for us to keep in mind, when we're talking about micro, people think micro means small. And we want to think about it more on an organizational level, right? So you have like systemic racism and oppression, which people understand. And that's macro level stuff. Yeah. When we're talking about micro, we're talking about it's happening person to person or like small group. That's the micro level. So not that it's small, but that it's happening on a person to person individualized level. That's where the microaggressions come from. Mm-hmm. So I think just really highlighting for people all of the ways that shows up and getting into a discussion about how that comes racially, gender, we want to think about in terms of sexuality, gender orientation, right? There are all of these different ways that microaggressions can come into your life. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I think it's really important for us to have a little bit of a conversation about is we sort of armor up in different spaces. Like, I know I'm going to come into this situation where I might be the only Black person, so I'm prepared for...
You're the second person that said that in the last 2 weeks, that they have to armor up to go into a situation as a Black person.
Right? Yeah. Like you get yourself together and and you be on your P's and Q's. The times where it can really hurt is when you feel like it's a safe space and somebody says something or does something and you like, Really?
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't know he was that type of person. Okay, and I gotta armor up with you too. And especially when it's like that feeling of like, but I love you, or I'm in relationship with you, but you're doing these things, or you're saying these things, or you're believing these things that are really harmful to me. And I feel like I gotta educate you too, like how exhausting that is mentally, physically, emotionally, to just feel like you have to explain and justify your life to people because there are systems of power and privilege in place that are marginalizing you.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. No, I thank you for kind of introducing the kind of the categories. I think we should probably dive into them a little bit more.
Yeah.
And for those and thank you for those that have already joined on Facebook Live at heat981fm.com. If you have examples of microaggressions that you've experienced, feel free to share them online or give us a call at 617-238-7111. So we have micro invalidations, micro insults, and micro assaults. I'm thinking maybe we start with micro insults, which is where people think that they're giving you a compliment, but really it says something about what their expectation is for people of your racial group. So they'll, wow, you're so intelligent. Like, why are you so surprised? You're
Exactly.
so articulate.
Like, why is that shocking? What did you think I was going to sound like? How educated did you think I was going to be in this space, right? And so you want to just be like, what? And I think, especially for Black women, right, our big one is comments about your hair.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing. Like, oh, your hair is so big today. And it's like, is it a comment? Is that a compliment? Like, why are you even mentioning it?
Right? And I think the one that everyone goes to, because we know, and it's just infuriating, is the like people trying to touch your hair.
Don't touch my hair.
Because it's like, I am not a pet. Like, why are you trying to pet me like a dog? Who goes up and touches other people's hair? Like, I have seen people who have had beautiful hairstyles, right? Or they've been like awesome in some different way. And you like, yeah, oh my goodness, you have questions. But I have never been like, here, let me put my whole hand in your hair. Like, how is this a thing? And how is this still a thing in 2021? Like, how have you not learned to not touch people's hair? And so, like, I will joke because I spent a lot of time, right? When we even think about like the impact of hair, especially on little Black girls, right? Because there's so much about how your hair is supposed to be different in order for you to fit in places. And so, are you natural? Are you getting it processed? Are you wearing weaves? Are you wearing braids? What does it say? What does it mean? And like, how is this a thing that it says something about who I am as a person because of what's going on with my hair? And so, like, we joke in my family because I'll do a quick little thing. I got all my colors going on today.
We got her braids.
When I get my braids, I'm like, I want all the colors because I'm going to do some stuff I can't do with my regular hair. And for a really long time, I wouldn't do it because that's not professional. And I need to be professional. People coming to me for therapy. People coming for me because I need to sound like I know what I'm talking about. And then I was just like...
And there are some organizations where they would tell you that your hair needs to be just one color. It needs to be a color that occurs naturally. Yes, and you've heard that, right?
Yes.
It needs to be a color that occurs naturally, for hair, so it can't be like something off. Yeah.
And so let's talk about that one, right? Because we hear that all the time. But like, for Black girls, dyeing your hair like a shade of mahogany is... Everybody does it. Everybody has, not everybody, like 75% of the people have done that reddish brown mahogany because that's our jam. That's what we go to. And like, that color does not occur in nature.
No. But also I've seen where like Black women who have red highlights in their braids, maybe they get some yarn braids or something and some of them are red, they'll get called out. But like a white woman who has dyed her hair red does not get called out for having red hair. Yeah. Yes.
And you want to think about like, so your hair comes out your head however it comes out, and you style it however you style it, and you go about and nobody says anything to you. But when I have my hair that comes out of my hair and I style however I style it, all of a sudden there's questions about professionalism and does it look and does it blend, and like the fact that we are still in this day and age trying to pass the Crown Act to say that you can't discriminate against people's hairs. Like, how does that have anything to do with what I'm doing in my job, right? And so we want to think about all of that because it's distracting.
For who? And what makes it unprofessional? Because, one thing is the more that we learn, even just about our own culture, about African cultures, we realize how diverse African hair is.
Yes.
And in many ways, there's so many things that we can do with our hair, and there's so many ways that we can change it. And I think, of course, we go back to history of when Africans were brought to the U.S. as slaves. One of the first things they did was shave their head off and just kind of say, we own your body, and so this idea of trying to police what Black people do with their hair goes way back. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we see like the reflection of that even with when you think about like the laws that were passed that said Black women couldn't have their hair out, right? You need to cover that up because it's too much. So then Black women, we're going to be extra. We're going to get our scarves and make them beautiful and really like, okay, you said I have to do this, so I'm going to go and really, show my individuality, show my personality. Well, now that's too much.
Right. Exactly.
So it's you create these catch-22 things where it's really saying like who you are is not good enough. And even when it then comes to the point of the micro insults because they think they're complimented, like, your hair is so interesting, it can do so many things. Thank you.
What are you really saying?
Right.
What are you really saying? Right.
It's just like, thank you. Or I don't know if you've ever gotten this one. I will say I've gotten this because I do a lot of things with my hair because I'm about that life. We'll be like, your hair is different all the time. I almost didn't recognize you. There's 5 Black women in this office. I'm pretty sure that you recognize me. Like, my hair was not that different, really. But you can't say that, right? So internally, I'm thinking that. But I can't let that show on my face. Why? Because if I do, then I'm the angry Black girl in the office.
Right.
And now I have to deal with that. Any type of emotion that I'm showing that is not unenthusiastic joy and pleasure to be here. Now we got to have talk, right?
Yeah.
Like, your attitude, your demeanor, the way that you're presenting, you're intimidating some folks. By how I show up and the fact that my natural resting face looks this way.
Or when you're insulted that you say something about it.
Right.
You're not supposed to speak up. And again, that's going straight back to you're not allowed to speak up for yourself. You're not really equal.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so what does that, when we think about now linking that back to mental health, what does that do if every time I have to go to this place where I know people are going to say stuff to try me, but I can't respond? Right. Because if I do, that jeopardizes my livelihood, right? So I'm going to smile and be pleasant even when people are doing things that are offensive and hurtful to me. So I have to armor up all of the time. Yeah. And then how exhausting it is to have that armor up all of the time. But then also the fallout that comes from when you say, I'm tired of armoring up and I don't want to do that anymore. Right. Because then you get fallback too, right? You get pushback. And so I am loving some of the conversations that are happening right now with Black women in sports, right? And around the Olympics, and the women who are saying like, I'm done. Like, I'm not going to
injure myself for other people.
For like your entertainment and pleasure. And the people who are like, well, it's your job. You signed up for it. I signed up to be a tennis player. I signed up to be a gymnast. I signed up to do A, B, and C. I did not sign up for you to critique everything that I do and the way that I do it. And like, specifically, I want to say for like the Simone Biles situation, right? Because we all like love her. She's ours, right?
GOT.
Okay. You have this like, so we're in an environment where you're telling me I'm so much better than everybody else that you are not going to score me fairly because it would inspire other people. Well, are we not supposed to be showing that we're the best? Right. So I can't, if I show that I'm the best, you're not going to score me the same way that you would score somebody else. Okay, I'm gonna eat that loss, right? And then I'm dealing with all of this pressure and all of these things, and I'm the face of the team. And we're talking about someone who is a sex abuse survivor, who is back in an arena that fostered that, right? Yeah. And, excuse me. And so then I say, yeah, I'm feeling all of this pressure. I can't trust my body anymore because I'm having this disconnect. So I'm going to step out. Yeah. And people got a whole lot of things to say about it. When you still there, smiling, cheering people on, being a captain, supporting your team members, letting somebody else get a turn to shine, and supporting them through all of that. And you still have people who got stuff to say. So in every situation, when I'm telling you, in the nicest way possible, right? Because how many of us, if we went and they were like, Dr. Carryann, you are such a good doctor that we don't think it's fair to recompensate you at the same level because everybody's trying to come to you for services, and that's not fair to the other people. So instead of paying you your reimbursement rate, we don't pay you 10% less, but you still gotta, do your thing. Like, how many of us would be like, I'm about to throw some change.
Exactly. It makes sense.
But you still smiling, you still pleasant, you still whatever, and still people have stuff to say because when you signed up for it, you knew what you was getting yourself into. No, I did not.
So then when we think about like having to go back day after day to an environment like that, as you mentioned, at some point you reach a breaking point. And I imagine there's a lot of different reactions to it based on people's personality types.
Yes.
So there's going to be some people that just kind of bend to the environment and just try to conform and just say, hey, you know what? I need this for my survival. I need this for my livelihood. So I'm just going to try to not be different. Yes. As much as I can, I'm just going to try to blend in with all the folks here. I won't complain about anything. I won't, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And how does that affect mental health when you're just suppressing?
Absolutely. And I think I would want to highlight too, there's the suppression where you know you're suppressing, but I think also there's a suppression where we don't know, because we've bought into the like they didn't mean any harm, right?
Yeah.
And so I remember having things where people were really being offensive, but I was just dismissing it. Like, no, because they're my friends, they're my teacher, they're my this, they're my that, they're this somebody who I have this relationship with and I think well of, and I want them to think well of me. So I'm not going to really look at what's underneath what's happening. I'm just going to dismiss it because I want to stay in connection and community and relationship with this person, right?
Yeah.
So I'm purposefully not seeing it. And then there's the version where it's like I do see it, but I'm just dismissing it because I can't be in that place. And what happens and how long you can stay in that place. And then we want to think about like how much is that then correlated to the health problems that we see happening, to the mental health issues that we see happening, to the food issues that we see happening, to the drug issues that we see happening. So all of these things where people are trying to cope with the fact that in their day-to-day lives they are experiencing all of this invalidation, all of this harm, all of this impact by people who are looking at them and saying, but I didn't mean it.
So therefore, you need to just dismiss it.
Right? You need to just, or you need to stop being so sensitive.
Yeah, you're so sensitive. I didn't really mean it that way.
Right?
Yeah.
I didn't know he was going to take it that way. I didn't know you couldn't take a joke.
Like, who are you, Chris Rock? You know, there's sometimes things that comedians can get away with that ordinary people really shouldn't say to other people.
And sometimes there's some things that the comedians say, you like, that was not funny. Like you punching down. Yeah. And when we're thinking about this level of microaggressions, right, it's about that power and privilege. So if you're exerting it on somebody who has less than you, you're punching down. Exactly. And you need to not do that, right? Like, let's be aware, because I think sometimes too, we especially know it when it's happening racially, but we don't think about all of the other contexts that it happens. So one of the things that I said to you that I think is like so common, but is so infuriating when you like get that awareness is when you get around like elder family members that haven't seen you for a while and they do that, you put on weight. Do you think I don't have a mirror? Do you think I don't know? I've been eating cookies. I have been. I don't need you to tell me that. Thank you kindly, right? But they like, how is this a greeting? Yeah. How are we greeting people this way? Like,
how is this acceptable? When did this ever become acceptable?
To really just say this, and and again, like I know that there might be some people who are like, you are sensitive about that. No, fatphobia is a thing. There is fat discrimination, and it is real.
Right. So is it an issue, particularly when you live in a culture where fat discrimination occurs? Because I know that kind of comment happens in a lot of different cultures in the diaspora, kind of the general Black diaspora, different Caribbean, African. But if there's a fat shaming culture, like in the U.S., then it has a special kind of like valence. I mean, it's not helpful anywhere, but it has a special valence in the U.S. and other cultures that I like that.
Absolutely, right. And so we want to think about all of those other places where people are saying and doing things, and this is why I think it's important for us to understand like microaggressions can be on purpose, but they can also be inadvertent because we sometimes are the person who's doing the microaggression, and like we need to like own it and okay, how can I learn from this, right? And so thinking about those situations where people are saying things, and you really want to be like, do you understand the harm that you are causing people? And even if they're not calling you out on it, even if they're still smiling, even if they're still staying silent, doesn't mean that they don't feel the harm and the impact of that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So for those of you listening, if you're just joining, if you have anything you want to share, any stories you want to share, give us a call at 617-238-7111. That's 617-238-7111. You can also check out the Facebook live stream. Just go to the page heat981fm.com. And just checking Facebook and a comment about, the hair touching thing is a no. Yeah, it's an interesting thing because I grew up in Jamaica, and I don't think anyone ever really would like touch your hair and say, oh my gosh, In the U.S., I remember I got braids and people are like touching it, and somebody asked me how much it cost, and it's just really interesting. You do get more comments on these things, but you talked a little bit about whether when people have microaggressions towards you and whether you just accept them and not say anything. And I remember when I first moved to the US, there are a lot of different comments you get, because I moved to a part of the country that was just not very diverse. And I was in a lot of very white spaces with people that don't really see a lot of Black people, let alone from another country, you know, with an accent and all these other things. And so people would make all kinds of comments. And I remember initially just kind of being confused because I was not used to living in a racialized culture in that way. I'm used to like colorism and classism, but not the kind of like racialized culture. But yeah, within my first few years of living in the US, I learned of all kinds of things, like the curse of ham. Have you heard of that?
Oh, that's why it was Noah's son who looked when he was drunk, and that's why Black people exist.
That's something about the curse of Ham and the Black person. Yeah, and I was just like, what is this nonsense? But I had never heard of that until I moved to America. So you know, there's just a lot, and it's interesting how people felt the need to tell me that when I moved here too, even if they believed it. It's like, I guess they could have kept it to themselves, but they shared it with me as well. So it's interesting. And at the time, I didn't even realize how much it was like taking this in and just kind of stuffing it down. But I think about that, and you're right. Like, you don't realize how much it kind of like makes you tired, like wears you down, and you can't even relax because you don't know like how you're being perceived and how people are interpreting your existence, and the assumptions they're making about you. So you talked a little bit also about micro assaults, where people kind of know that they are they know what they're doing, and they're doing it deliberately. But you're right, it's person to person, so it's not a small thing. It's just that it's not necessarily directly systemic. It's a person saying something to you. I don't know if you had anything more to mention about micro assaults or even the micro invalidations either, where people just kind of say they don't know. Because I feel like a lot of what I experienced when I first came to the US was actually micro invalidations too. Is just kind of like, well, they kind of feel like they're better than me. And they make these comments to indicate that, but they think that they are just harmless comments. So I don't know if you have anything else to kind of mention about that.
Yeah, so I think like one of the things that comes that I think is really just ridiculous, and I think it's really something that we need to look at in, particularly in the Black community, is the relationship that we have with the LGBTQIA plus community, right? And so again, this idea of like, are you punching down? And so I was recently in a family gathering. People, again, family, love them, love everybody there. But there was a comment that was made, and I was like, I gotta get up and leave, because I will go full on social worker up in here, and it will not be a good thing, right? And so it's thinking about how those things come up. And so, you know, I think especially like when you were talking about like the church thing, right? Yeah. Like, and the thing of him, and I'm like, yep, I know, because I was raised, and I know, like, these are the things, the stories that you know. And so the love the sinner, hate the sin. That is such a microaggression. I love you, honey, but I hate who you are. Then do you love me? I mean, really, like, why is it? And so even when we think about, like, I can think of so many times when I was in church, right, and they were railing against sexuality, but there are all kinds of things that we never mention, that never get mentioned, right? And even when you talk about necessarily like fornication, so if I'm straight and I'm having sex, people be like, oh, you shouldn't do that. But nobody really gives too much of a crap. But if I'm somehow involved in a homosexual relationship or a same-sex relationship, or, you know, anything other than heterosexuality, then it's even worse, right? Because you deliberately choose and sin. Well, we all sin all day, every day. So why is this a thing that like we're stigmatizing, right? And this is the part where I am very much like, I own the fact that there were times where I was the person who was saying things, you know? I had the experience where someone was like, I was afraid to come out to you because I know that you're very religious, and I didn't know how you were going to take that. And I'm like, this is someone who I love. They should never feel that they can't, you know, be who they are with me. Okay, well, we need to educate ourselves really and think about some of the things that we're saying, because I did say some stuff that was like, because you don't know, right? Like, you don't know what you don't know. And so that, I think, is more of the like micro invalidation level. But when people know, you know that you are causing harm. You know that there are statistically higher rates of depression, of suicide, of isolation, of all of these things. And it's, let's say your child who is in front of you and you don't have to get out of my house because I don't allow that.
Yeah.
That's an assault, right?
Yeah.
You're telling me that who I am is not good enough to be in your presence.
Yeah.
No, right? And what other activity do people, and that sounds crazy because it's not an activity, right? But what else do we know that someone does where we're like, no, I'm not going to be in a relationship with you if that's what you do. That is not harming anyone, right? It's because I'm flashing back to our conversation around boundaries, right?
Yeah.
So it's different when we're setting boundaries for things where we're like, this is causing harm. And so, but really that has nothing to do with harming anybody. So why does it involve you, right? And so think about that. And so when we're thinking about those micro assaults, right, there are purposeful things that people are doing that they know, right? It is that, like, I'm thinking of one that's like a common one right now, right? All the people who are like, well, we got to get rid of this unemployment stimulus money because nobody wants to work. Let's talk about why I'm not running to McDonald's to work for you, right? Let's talk about why some of these places are not doing that. And I think it's so interesting because in my work doing clinical training, I remember being at a training that I was leading around people who were managers of a group home, who were straight up talking about like, I'm about to quit this job and work at Amazon. I will really make more money and not have to deal with this level of stress. And so if we're talking about the managers of a program are like, it's about time for Amazon for me. What is happening for the line staff people, right? What's happening for the janitors? What are happening for the people who are working hard to keep people safe and to provide services and are feeling like this is not worth it for me because I am dealing with this level of aggression every day. And then to have someone look at you and say, well, you just being lazy. You just want that government money. You're not going to do nothing for yourself. Like, are you kidding me? Do you know what I'm putting up with on a regular basis? And so those are the things where you're just like, no, you said that stuff on purpose. Like, you cannot tell me in this day and age that you do not understand why someone might feel that they're worth at least $15 an hour. Please keep moving. Like, no. And if you can't find anybody who's willing to work for less, then maybe you need to think about what's going on in your job, that people are not signing up for that, right? Why? Why should I jeopardize my health, my sanity, my all of this to go out and be on the front lines for you and your comfort and your peace? But you don't have no support for me, right? You got people who are getting cussed out because they're telling people they need to wear masks. So
in one state, someone got shot because they told they were at a grocery store, like a cashier at a grocery store, and a customer came up and the woman just reminded him to wear a mask, and he went back and got a gun and shot her.
Right? So I'm working at the grocery store. Yeah. I'm just trying to.
This is a cashier. I mean, our young people are cashiers. They're just doing what they're being told to do, which is they're told to ask customers to wear masks, and people get so offended. Yeah,
so offended, and we've seen the videos where people just get like verbal abuse heaped on them. Man, I just came to work. I am just trying to be here, do my job, make my money, and get out so I can live my life. I am not setting. But if you see me on the floor, please understand I did not set any policy. I have no policy power at all. I am just doing what I was told to do by someone so that I can keep this job. Yeah. And you are heaping abuse on me. Yeah. When I'm just I can't say nothing back. No. Because then I'm even more going to get fired. So I'm going to get fired if I don't tell you to put the mask on. And I'm also going to get fired if I come for you when you come for me. Right. So I'm in this catch-22 situation again, and then thinking about what is the weight and the impact of that on someone's mental health, right? And we just sort of have this attitude that I think is very American of suck it up and deal with it. Yeah. You just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and deal with it. And what is that meaning for someone's ability to really cope, right? And I think it's really important too, because then when you say things like this, you'll have, especially I think our elders who we really try to revere, who will say things like, well, back in my day, we just dealt with it. you also drop dead at 50.
Right. There are different circumstances.
Right. And I'm trying to live. And so, not to negate that, because I also understand, and y'all had to deal with a lot. Mm-hmm. We are also having to deal with a lot. And it may look different, but the impact is the same. So let's think about what that impact is on our functioning and on our health. And especially what it is then, if I come home and people still don't understand, right? And I'm still getting it. So there's, again, that sense of there's no place where I can put my armor down. Because if I come to you and I say, these people at work got me stressed out, I really think I might need to get some counseling. We don't do counseling. You know what you need to do? You need to go to church. But I'm going to go to church and they're going to also tell me how I'm wrong and I'm bad and I just need to pray and fast. Okay, so I'm praying and fast and I'm still feeling however it is that I'm feeling. So I need some more, no, just deal with it.
Yeah.
Just deal with it has caused so much problems in our community.
We're holding on to so much inside.
Exactly.
We're holding on to it inside. As you mentioned, there's health problems, emotional problems. Yeah.
And when you think about then how those patterns then get transmuted generationally, right? And so how many of us maybe were raised in homes where people couldn't show genuine emotion. So we don't learn how to show genuine emotion, right? And so there's all of these really generational legacies that we have to deal with. And that when you're then calling some things out and being actually we can see that this is the effect of what's happening, because we're doing such and such, then people be well, that's the culture and you just need to understand it. Okay. Again, now what do I say in this situation? There's nothing I can say to this. And so you have to, and then I'm picking my battles, right? I'm deciding whether or not I want to continue. And so I think we want to just really be mindful about how much having to armor up, how much feeling like we don't have that safe space and that space to be genuinely ourselves. Going back to one of your points, right? I'm feeling like I have to conform to survive. Right. So I can't be my authentic self. And, and this is some of the work that I do with my coaching clients is figuring that out, because for some of us, we have spent so much of our lives conforming that we don't even know who we genuinely are. It's I am responding to who other people's expectations of me are, and I don't know what I genuinely want, need, desire for myself. I'm just so busy meeting everybody else's needs or trying to just be safe in the situation that I'm in that I don't even have the capacity to explore myself.
Wow. I mean, for those of you that are listening, we're talking about microaggressions today. I'm talking with Deb Jackson, and you can give us a call at 617-238-7111. That's 617-238-7111. Or you can follow along on the live stream, Facebook Live at heat981fm.com. And I wanted to go back to something that you had mentioned, Deb, which was about this idea of us examining our own, the ways that we have maybe, I guess, been the person who had done some kind of microaggression. Because I think sometimes in the Black community, we think so much about how other people have microaggressions towards us and that kind of thing. But there are ways in which we do the same for other kinds of people groups. You mentioned one which had to do with folks in the LGBTQI plus community. But, there's a lot of things. I mean, I think about it a lot from the immigrant perspective because I know what it's like to kind of move to this country. And I think that there are a lot of times where there's kind of this American versus other kind of dynamic that occurs. And so even people groups that feel like they might be oppressed in America, they still sometimes can punch down towards immigrants as they come into the country too. And they don't even realize they're doing it. And there's also this pressure to conform. And that's something I see a lot in immigrant kind of experience is this idea of I need to conform to the American way of doing things to survive here. If I try to hold on to my own cultural practices, habits, clothing, way of speaking, people will assume if I have an accent that I don't speak English as a native speaker, or that I don't understand English, or even just that even if I speak English with an accent, this idea that I'm not as intelligent as them because I have a specific kind of accent. Obviously, if you have a British accent, everybody thinks you're smart. But if you're from certain other places and you have an accent, people tend to believe that your knowledge of English is equivalent to your intelligence, which is a stereotype, right?
It's very false, and I think it's one of the things that is honestly sad funny in this country is that like being multilingual any place else is a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like I speak 2, 3, 4, 5 languages. Oh, that's awesome. Here, you just need to speak English and speak it fluently.
And speak it with an American accent.
And speak it with an American accent, right? Because otherwise, no. And so that absolutely is a thing. And, you know, in transparency, I'll share sort of 2 ways that I knew I did microaggressions to some. So one that I share, and I do a specific training around cultural responsiveness. And it happened in that training. So
oh, wow.
it's like, oh, goodness. But now I share that as an example to just try and get people to think about it and how sometimes it is unintentional. So I was doing a training. It was actually for a JRI program, and I was doing it on our cultural responsiveness training, and it was right before Thanksgiving. And so people come on and you do like your chit chat before you get started. So I was asking people about the holiday and were they looking forward to it and what food were they wanting to eat and so on and so forth. And then, you know, everybody came on, we get into the training and we're going along. And then when we got to the slide on microaggressions, I thought, you act like this is a holiday for everybody, but there could be people on this call who really, it's a day of mourning. Like we're commemorating a slaughter of a people. And how do you feel if you come on to a training that is around cultural responsiveness and the first thing you hear is the instructor celebrating or talking about celebrating something that for you is a personal tragedy? Like that would be like, you know, coming onto a training and they'd be like, yes, well, you know, like the celebration day for the Ku Klux Klan is coming up. How are you celebrating? Like, what the heck?
Yeah.
And so I like recognized and I was like, dang, okay. And it's that like do better, recognize the difference between intent and impact. I apologize in that training. And I do share that story as a like, so this is how it can happen. And, you know, and we don't mean it, we don't mean to, but it has impact, and we need to think about how we can be better. And then specifically to your story around immigrants, one of my best friends, Jazz, is Jamaican. We've been friends for a lot of years, and Jazz has 2 accents. There's the accents when she's talking to American people or United States born people, and then there's the accent that she has when she's like with her family and you know, friends, which is more heavily Jamaican. And so I'm used to her talking in the more Americanized accent, which still is an accent, but it's much less. And so one day I was at her house and I'm the only American person there. They joke and say, like, I'm their little American girl that's there, and everyone else is Jamaican. And so they are very heavy in their patois. And I was looking at her and I'm like, could you maybe talk in the other voice because I could understand you better? And she was like, you've been here for years, girl, you better learn.
Exactly.
But I thought to myself, can we talk for a moment about the absolute audacity of saying to someone in their own home among their folks, I don't understand you well enough. You need to change the way that you speak for my comfort, even though everyone else is fine. And also, to her point, I've been around for years. Like, you should know a little bit more. And so, again, in the moment, did I think about the fact that that was like an incredibly insulting thing to say? No, I was like, I'm trying to be part of the conversation and I'm having a hard time following. Like, I know you could do the other voice. Could you like, do the other voice for me? And she was like, no, like, get your whole self together. And I felt that in that moment of like, you should be ashamed.
It's kind of like someone saying, hey, I have difficulty pronouncing your name, change it.
Yeah.
Which is what people from other countries get. People from African country and Asian cultures, often like Americans, if they can't pronounce their name, they'll say, well, can you just give me a shortened version of it or change your name for my sake? And it's like, no, learn to pronounce my name or try. And I watched this really great clip of someone who, you know, it was a first generation African girl who went to school and like everybody had difficulty pronouncing her name, and she went back home and she said to her mom, you know, just call me such and such, like an Americanized name. And her mom said, I'm not calling you that. I gave you a name and I'm going to call you the name I gave you. And she said, listen, people, they learn how to pronounce names if it's important to them. So in literature class, they learn how to pronounce Dostoevsky or whatever, and they learn how to pronounce these long names for European people. They need to learn how to pronounce your name as an African person. And so it's kind of this, I think it is also a microaggression for people to kind of like complain about not being able to pronounce your name or to ask you to change your name. I think people have varying levels of kind of responses if somebody tries to pronounce it and they can't. Some people are kind of like, thank you for trying, and others are kind of like still unhappy and saying you should just learn how to do it right. But I think effort is at least the minimum is effort.
Absolutely, right? And so that is one thing that I've seen that clip as well, and I thought it was brilliant. And so when I do trainings, right, sometimes you look at people's names and you're like, and so I'll do like, I'm sure that I'm going to say this wrong. Please correct me when I'm done.
Exactly.
Right? And then I make an attempt. They correct me when I'm wrong. Sometimes it will take me to, sometimes I'm like, I need to write this down phonetically because I'm not, like, help me, you know, to, and you do try, right? And I think people show so much appreciation for that. Like, you at least were trying, especially if it's like genuine effort, right? Because we know when it's like, I'm trying, I just might not get it right, versus like, I'm just gonna say whatever. Like, I'm not even really attempting to try, I'm just saying whatever it is. And it's very disrespectful, right? Because it's like, you are not acknowledging my presence enough to learn my name. That is incredibly insulting, right? And so I think we recognize some of those things that happens, but there are times where we're the person who's perpetrating that. And so maybe there's somebody who's listening now and they're like, oh gosh, I've done that. Like, I feel really, really bad right now. This is not about feel really, really bad. This is about learn and make a difference, right? And so what have you learned and how can you make a difference, and how might that really benefit someone in your life, that they recognize that, okay, that there's this change that has happened, that there is a realization and a way to move forward. And I think that that's sort of what we try to do, right? Is that we want people to be able to say when the microaggression happens, hey, I know that you think it was a compliment when you say I'm so articulate, but really, let me explain to you why it's not, right? And I may have the capacity to do that, and so then I should, and I will. And then there are times where I don't have the capacity to do that, and that is okay as well too, right? Like, not today, I just can't. But thinking about what that is, and that we should not be centering the feelings of the person who is performing the microaggressions, because it really isn't about you. It's about the person who's experiencing it. I don't care about the feelings of the person who stepped on my foot. I care about me and my foot, right? And so much of the work that we do is like trying to, like, you know, oh, well, we want to understand why you feel this way so that we can, no, I don't care about your feelings. I want you to stop immediately at this moment, cease and desist, right? And I'm not expecting perfect from you, because I don't expect perfect from everybody else, but when something is brought to your attention, stop immediately, cease and desist.
And it doesn't mean that that person is not a good person. I think that's why people are so defensive, is that they're trying to say, well, I'm not racist, or I'm not a bad person, I'm a morally good person. It's like, this is something that anybody can be guilty of, so to speak.
Absolutely.
A lot of good, morally good people who are not intending to be racist, can commit a microaggression. And I just want to mention, there's a few different things that are recommended for how to avoid microaggressions. I mean, it's not possible to be perfect. But one is to try to be vigilant of your own biases and your own fears. So if you try to examine, you know, when you come across a person that's different from you, what are the thoughts that pop into your mind? What are the feelings that pop into your heart? And why are those there? If you feel fear, for example, if you see a black man walk by and you clutch your purse, why did you do that? Why did you feel that? Try to examine why that belief is there and be vigilant of trying to challenge that thought and that feeling that you might be having. The other thing is to seek out interaction with people who are different from you. So in terms of race, culture, ethnicity, other qualities, because a lot of times people develop these stereotyped beliefs and these fears and these responses because of a lack of exposure. They've just never really been around other people like that. That's kind of what I experienced when I moved to the US, and the places that I went to, they had just never really been exposed to anybody like me. So a lot of these responses were just kind of like blurted out, like, oh my gosh. And it's because it's such a non-diverse place. So one of the ways to help avoid microaggressions is to learn more about people, but experientially to learn about people. The third is to not be defensive. If somebody corrects you, as we mentioned, we're not trying to criticize you or call you a bad person, but we want to kind of check you so that you don't make the same mistake in the future and continue to offend other people. And then along with that is being open to discussing your own attitudes and biases and how they might have hurt others or revealed bias on your part. So be open to discussing it. And then lastly, be an ally. So help to defend other people, because maybe you see it play out and the other person doesn't feel empowered to stand up for themselves. And maybe it's your turn to speak up on behalf of someone else. Or, especially if you feel like that person is just not empowered because of their position, maybe they're lower on the totem pole and they have more at stake if they speak up, you can always call that other person aside and say, listen, I'm just going to speak up on behalf of them. Maybe not even letting the person know you're doing it, but just to kind of say what you did was kind of offensive, So, any thoughts about that?
Two things. On the last thing that you said, one I think is like, speak up, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you see those things, do speak up, and don't expect the person who's been marginalized to always do the work.
Yeah.
And then don't do the thing too where you like go to them afterwards and was like, yeah, I was really wrong with like what John said in that meeting. I felt bad for you. Don't tell me afterwards, because that does nothing for me. You should have said something to John, and you should have said something in the meeting. And even if, to your point, right, maybe you don't want to say anything in the meeting too, but go to John to the side, and then come and tell me, I did talk to John about the fact that was wrong. But don't come to me and tell me that did you feel bad about what John said and you didn't say nothing to John. Like, that does not help me at all. And then to your other point, I think education is a big thing. And so there is a real colonization that happens in our learning system, right? We can't divorce the fact that white supremacy is baked into our educational system, and right now even more so, people are trying to break in the goodness of it. Goodness sarcastically, right? So are you doing the work of sort of unlearning some of those things, right? And so to the point of some of the examples that I shared, I had to unlearn, like, oh, there's this thing that I thought was a completely okay thing to say. Someone has like educated me, and now I'm gonna also like do my own work, right? Like do my own education, do my own research to figure out like exactly why is this a problematic thing to say. Are we doing that because there is so much that we have learned that is really problematic? And so are you spending time with other people, right? Because if you're having that internal like, let me clutch my purse because you have heard so many years of black on black crime statistics, what you also have not heard is that white on white crime is a real thing. And you actually are much more likely to be robbed by a white person when you are white than you are to be robbed by a black person. So like, let's have some clarity about that.
And that's exactly right. It's kind of like thinking, where is that coming from, and what should you do about it, and being empowered to do something. So all right, so I think that is it for today. I think it was a great discussion about microaggressions. We'll probably have to have you back on next month, and maybe there'll be a part 2 or something, because I have like a whole list of different kinds of microaggressions that even just the idea of asking people, where are you from?
Yes.
Black people get asked that question a lot more often than white people. And then, folks that are Asian get asked all the time if they're, what country, what's your country of origin? They're like, I'm American. Like, no, but really, like, where are you really from? Like, I'm from New York, Yes. So they get asked a lot of that too. So that's a microaggression as well. You are a credit to your race. I hear that less often these days, but it's still something that happens. There's the I have a black friend defense, which we haven't even gotten to that one yet.
Yes.
There's that, what they call the myth of meritocracy. Like, well, I believe the most qualified person should get the job.
The one who gets the
job,
right?
And this idea that, no, or this idea that like, well, I think you got into college because you're black, and it's a diversity thing. And I know that I've been asked that once by someone who thought they were kind of asking it in a very academic way. Like, do you think that your race played into you getting into medical school? Are you kidding me? So no.
Well, and like the thing, and I will absolutely love to come back and talk about this more, but the thing that cracks me up about that is that they somehow, in the imagination of this, right, it is that there were 50,000 white people that applied and won you.
Right.
And then they took in, the 299 people that they had slots for, and then they were like, well, we need one black person. Oh, she applied. She's the one. Like, was there no other competition? And it also really discounts all of the people who got in because they were legacy.
Right.
All of the people who got in because of their connections, all of the people who got in because of their donations, all of the people who got in for all of these other things, but we don't have a problem with them.
Right.
We have a problem with you because visibly we can understand why. And that the fact that we know statistically the people who benefited most from affirmative action were white women.
Right.
But most of the cases that we're trying to dismantle affirmative action were brought by white women. So can we talk about how you trying to cut your own throat because you thought that I got something that you deserve?
Right.
I need to come back and talk about that.
So we'll have you come back in September. Thank you guys for joining us today for Black Mental Health Matters. Check in again next Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on heat981fm.com. So we'll talk with you then. Bye.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the show today. For more on Black mental health, you can go to my website, drkerryann.net. You can also follow me on Instagram, also at drkerryann. And tune in every Sunday to Black Mental Health Matters, Sundays at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on heat981fm.com.